Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we tackle a single relevant question based on our Bible reading for that day. And this week our reading is centered around the book of Luke. Today I'm joined by Alyssa Bream and Zack Unkenholz. Our question today comes from our reading in Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 34. But let me back up and say, since this is the first day of the week, the theme of Luke is the Son of Man. And as one of the Gospels, it talks about Jesus' teaching, emphasizing love, kindness, obedience to God's laws. Jesus exemplifies these traits through parables like the prodigal son and the lost sheep, which we will talk about this week. It describes how Jesus lived as the Son of Man, so more of his fleshly side, the earthly body piece, I would guess, maybe, and how we can live a life patterned after his. And so today we're going to look at Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 34. And this is the parable of the rich young ruler, or the rich fool. It says, "Then someone called from the crowd, 'Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me.'" Now this that begins very similar to the prodigal son story about dividing, his estate. Jesus replied, "Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that?" Then he said, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." I would say that, and I don't know that, well, the thing I like about this story is it tells me that this isn't just a modern problem.
Mm.
How much you have determines your self-worth often. This is the way it is. So the question I want to ask today are, what are some signs that money and earthly possessions have become too important to us?
I think for some people, there are certain people that I cannot talk with them without them turning the conversation over to being about money. Whether about how much they have, how are you saving your money or spending your money, million mile secret kind of stuff. About and
What is a million mile secret?
oh, it's like a blog my dad used to read all the time
Okay.
about how to get miles for flights and things like that. And
Oh,
whenever I talk to my uncle, he always talks about the conversation will always go to how to say, are you getting your miles? Have you signed for this credit card? And and not that that's bad stuff to talk about, but when that's all people care about, when it's clear that for many people that is what the a lot of their life is judged by how many miles do I have over you, or how much money is in my bank account versus you. And it's kind of taboo to ask somebody, hey, how much money do you have? But you can tell that for so many people, money is such a huge part, and it is a big part of our lives, right? You need to have money for food and shelter, and a lot of the important things to survive. But just as we read here, it's not the money is not the measure of a good life, and it's not the measure of what's even purposeful.
Yeah, and I think one important thing is that it's not the rich that have this problem. I think it equally affects people who are poor and all levels of wealth, because it's the worrying about it. It's the making that the most important thing, whether it's, and I think sometimes actually the people that don't have a lot almost are more infected by it, because that has to become their consuming thought of, how do I get my next meal? Where are we going to, pay rent from? All of these questions. And so I think whenever generosity starts to get affected, whenever they're not willing to share what they have, is really a sign that it's a heart problem and not just and it's a problem.
Yeah, I do agree that it's not just a rich or poor, a rich problem. It is a cultural problem that can infect us in different ways. I know I cannot. One, I can't speak to this with authority, but two, I can't relay this exactly like I heard it. But I recently heard a video clip of T.D. Jakes preaching a sermon, and he was talking about how the black community, and statistically, I didn't realize this. I had to go do some reading because I thought he was not telling the truth. People who buy these ultra brands, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Prada, it is fairly evenly split by relatively poor people and ultra wealthy people. And he talks about in the black community that they will spend an entire month's paycheck on a purse so that they can show somebody they've achieved something. It's a sign, it's a symbol on the outside, because they are worried. The reason they do it is because they're worried about what people think. Am I successful? Can I achieve something? And so it becomes a symbol to them of I have achieved something. And I'd never given that a lot of thought about how people will go out of their way to portray something, because we do measure one another based on cars we drive, houses we live in, clothes we wear, whether we like that or not. We do. And I think we know what greed looks like, but it's hard to see when we're in that balance, when we're in that delicate position of, what's enough, what's not enough. For me, I'll speak for myself personally. I mean, I don't mind having money conversations. But it doesn't tend to be the first place I go. I do think in terms of economics. My brain works that way.
You do like to save miles and
I do,
get miles.
But I don't ask everybody. Are you getting your miles? I think Zach just called his dad out on the podcast.
I think I've seen some Facebook posts from you about miles.
What miles? I have. Yeah, I have. I've made a few, and I want people to be frugal or wise, but this doesn't seem to. I just don't want it to be the first piece of conversation that I'm always talking about. But for me, the times when I notice things are out of balance is when it consumes my thoughts, the things that I'm thinking about. That's when I see that it's most out of balance. Because sometimes you have to talk about it. People ask you questions, what should I do? How do I do this? How do you do this? Whatever. So you end up talking about it. Unfortunately, with a business and here at the church, there's way more business involved in this job than people realize, just having to manage, and we're coming up on budget. Well, maybe even by the time this comes out, we'll be in the middle of budget season for us. And so that's a real headache. You can't avoid it. And I don't even think that's what Jesus is saying. But I think he's trying to tell us it can't dominate your life. That can't be the number one thing that drives your conversations, drives your thoughts. Like I said, I don't notice it as much in my conversations as I do in my thought. That's when I notice that things are out of whack. And I've never thought of myself as greedy, but that doesn't mean other people couldn't view me that way, But I just say for myself, when I become consumed with those thoughts, and when I was younger, and both of you I'm old enough to be both of you's father. The status piece concerned me a lot. Like that's what consumed my thoughts. What do people think? Do people think I'm successful? Do they think I'm an idiot? Have I achieved enough? Now, the things that are more likely to consume my thoughts are not status, because I'm to the point in my life that I don't really care. Like if you like what I've got or think well of it, and that's fine. If you don't, I don't care. Now it's more because I'm closer to the end. It's more a security thing, So what are my last years on life going to look like? Am I going to have to work until I'm 65, 70, 75, 80? Am I going to have to work till the day I die? What is that going to look like? So I tend to spend more time thinking about how can I create. Some people would call it freedom. I don't really care which way you want to call it. Freedom, security, they're both the same thing. So that for me, that's where I find myself. I have to guard my thought life. Is is that what is always consuming me? And it's not just money, it's earthly possessions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys find you stress out about possessions more, or certain kind of possessions, or is it because you're in two different we're in three different generations here, but you're two separate generations, and so you have a different view of those things than I do.
So this is something really interesting. Recently, as a gift, I got a cup, right? It's like a fancy like mug thing. It's called a Stanley, and I got it as a gift. And I have never had anything that I've had more comments on before, ever.
It's like wearing a Supreme T-shirt, right?
It's like wearing a Supreme. It's like everyone's like, "Whoa, Zach's got a Stanley," and I'm like, "I got it as a gift. I didn't. I looked it up after."
So we got prophets and watches. We got preachers and sneakers. What can we do? Manleys and Stanleys.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know, but I was like, but having this,
I think it's more that it's a massive jug, and you and Cheryl have matching gray Stanleys.
Yes, that is true.
The comments came from, at least.
Well, at youth group, like, I mean, if I had bring it to youth group, like, it's almost like I even talked to Jess about it because I got it as a gift from somebody. I was told it was on sale, and I asked her about it, and she said, well, it's a gift. Like, you shouldn't, because I feel almost bad. It feels weird because I'm like, I know it's a pretty expensive thing. I feel weird having it with me, especially with so many comments about it.
How much can it cost?
Like
$75.
That's a lot of money for a cup.
I agree. It's a lot of money for a cup.
But
I have a free one, and mine's made in China. It's not even a Stanley cup; it's a fake Stanley.
But it does the same thing, and it's a lot of it's about like the status of it, I guess, But that's the thing is, like, I'm like, should I stop using this in public? That sounds so weird, but I don't know. I have like a certain level of discomfort.
But isn't that? Do you have to question false modesty? Do you understand what I'm saying? Are you trying to overcorrect for something? Because, so let me say for myself, I feel like as pastors, we are always judged by what we drive and where we live, based on world famous preachers who might be, you're just paid too much. You're in it for the money. I get more comments about the car I drive right now, and I've had it for almost 3 years now, and I paid half for it what I paid for the previous pickup truck that I was driving. But nobody thinks in those terms because everybody around here drives pickup trucks. It's a less common thing. And I have thought numerous times, you should just get rid of it and buy a more expensive pickup truck, and then nobody would say anything. Because you can feel like, am I showing off? Do people feel like I'm showing off? I don't know. Do y'all ever have those questions, concerns? Something besides
my cars have never been show-off cars. Thinking of the one that's in the mechanic right now that I'm hoping we can drive to Florida here in a few weeks. I don't think I think in those terms. I think for possessions, what comes to mind is not greed, but I get really weirdly sentimental about certain things, and I realize that my kids have that way. Like, I was talking to Judah about getting rid of some of his toys, giving them to a kid who doesn't, giving them to the daycare where lots of kids can play with them, or donating them, or doing something like that. And he was really sad. He's like, well, I have memories with those toys. And I think that is where possessions can also come in. It's like, I'm holding on to this because there's this memory attached, instead of finding hope and peace and finding things in that possession instead of finding it in Jesus.
Right.
And I think that can also be a tripping point, because it's just, I don't think it's bad to have sentimental possessions, but when every toy in your bedroom is sentimental, there's a problem.
Apparently, I'm the sentimental one in my family, and I know that sounds surprising, because I redid my desk in my office is my grandmother's piano, and I have a Christmas tree that her and my aunt made, a lighted Christmas tree. And now they're starting to die off. And the family, they all call me, do you want this? You know, would you like to have this? Like, what am I going to, like, no, I don't want a curio cabinet that was bought in 1980 with gold layered paint on it. I do not, you know, but I get that, you know, my wife is not as sentimental. Like, she just chunk it out, just throw it. When she's done with it. Yeah, get rid of it. Chunk it. Yeah.
Chunk it. Oh, man. Anyways, we'll have this conversation another time.
And I think each generation has the things that they struggle with, you know, and greed is. I think we know it when we see it. In our nation, and we're seeing the divide between people who are able to survive and people who are not grow rapidly, and unless there is a culture change of generosity, that's only going to get worse, you know, unless we figure out how to fix that. Some people call forced generosity socialism, but you know, my hope in Christ is that our hearts change to do it naturally, not, you know, forced, but either way. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue our conversation around the book of Luke.